But I think of this talk as Professor Van Sasson said, circles of philosophers. So I imagine this group as a circle around me, not only philosophers, but knowledgeable persons or future of intercultural leaders. So please think of this talk as that. At the end of my several introductory remarks, I will show some pictures, artworks from European people, European artists, both of Muslim origin and non-Muslim origin. Some of the images are not maybe very welcome. I'm sorry, because these are the images. That's what I said. We shouldn't avoid problems, but bring and see what we can do with it. What are these kind of images that create problems? And I would like you, we won't have time, but I thought of it in that way, as if I'll show you the images, and then you think in your mind what is your perception, and then you go to the text that you know, try to understand different layers of these images, and try to interpret. Okay, so this is a kind of exercise that I want to give and be part. I would have loved to be part of it, but we don't have time to ask you. But I imagine you as a circle of philosophers around me. So we all insisted on the difficulties and the importance of intercultural exchange and skills to develop in our world today, because the world in which we're living, that we call global world, is much more converging, united, and living in proximity with each other. And in spite of that proximity with each other, the global village, it doesn't mean that we are building peace or we are understanding each other's situation. On the contrary, proximity creates and builds, triggers conflict and hostility. So this is maybe one of the main points, because getting in proximity with each other doesn't enhance easily a multicultural, tolerant society. Now, these two words I want also you to maybe can be interesting guidelines for your discussions, why these two words became bad words, because we used to think about multiculturalism as a way of thinking difference, as a way of framing our societies in a more multicultural society from every part of the world. In the empires, it was multi-ethnic, multi-religious, Ottoman Empire, but also other empires. And then we have nation states, and today nation states doesn't create one single community of nationhood. We're living under very heavy waves of migrants from all over the world, and not only towards the Western societies. Look at the Syrian migrants today in Turkey. And so there are many, or in Tunisia, I think, in Libya. So there are many countries receiving also new migrants. It's not only for labor, but migrants fleeing from civil wars, despotic regimes, pogroms, ethnic cleansing, terrorism, and but also those who search for labor, education, or professional opportunities, even artistic freedom. They are coming to different city lives and trying to have new opportunities. We are all crossing national boundaries, and we're in constant search for adaptation to our environment, accommodation with it, to a new cultural environment. It's hard. First, it requires linguistic skills, but also to be familiar with the cultural codes of the other countries. So how do we relate to each other? How do we relate to other cultures, people coming from other cultures, individuals, groups, becomes a very important stake for inclusive societies. I'm not saying only democracy, but inclusive societies. How we create more inclusive societies in spite of different language communities, belief systems, because nation state was one of the responses to that, and we have seen to what extent it was dramatic. It gave also result to dramatic consequences in history because of its intolerance towards ethnic, religious, cultural heterogeneity. So the issue is today how to be more inclusive in a much more globalized world with migrant waves. I said two words were banned: multiculturalism, both from the Western world, from Holland, the most multicultural society, it was the intellectuals. Paul Schaeffer, who was one of the main thinkers of multiculturalism, he was the first one who said there is no possibility of living under multiculturalism. It doesn't avoid violence, because the issue is recognition of differences and avoidance of violence. And Netherlands was one of the first countries. And then maybe those who are interested in European recent contemporary history knows that every political leader, including the French one, although never they were open to multicultural society, announced that it was the end of multiculturalism in relation to thinking about Muslim difference in Europe. That was the main one. Secondly, in the academic world, I'm sure if I used the word tolerance, many of you would come up and criticize, saying, we don't want the word tolerance because it's always hierarchical. Who tolerizes who? Man tolerates women, Westerners tolerate the others. So toleration also was perceived as something which cannot frame our world of difference and heterogeneity, because it creates hierarchical values. Now, one of the exercises we can do, and I can ask you to do, is to think in different languages the word of tolerance. Because sometimes also English language is creating a kind of uniformization of our way of thinking. Because we always think tolerance through English word tolerance. I don't know Arabic, unfortunately. I shift back to Turkish. And the ministry, ex-ministry of education mentioned the word hoşgörü. And this should be from Iranian, also Persian origin. Hoşgörü, görü is perception, and hoş is nice. So it is not about tolerating the other, but the way you change your perception. Seeing, the way you perceive the other. So suddenly I do not apply the same criticism that we apply in social sciences to the notion of tolerance. This is not hierarchical. I'm not tolerating someone, but I'm changing my very perception of the other. Hoşgörü. So I think this is one of the ways of being intercultural. Trying to sometimes ask ourselves that we are in this way speaking through English language, in social sciences or other languages, but then shift back and forth in your own language, in your own environment, cultural environment, and think about this genealogy of these words. This is a kind of social scientific discipline, Köselik from Reinhard Köselik from Germany, who has made this. This is the way concepts are traveling in time and in different cultural contexts and acquiring different meanings. So maybe we can add to these discussions through different words coming from different languages, rather than always thinking about the etymological and genealogical meaning of tolerance. Okay, the second thing is when we think about inclusive societies, we think of state governance and law. This is very important, of course, but my talk will be on my insistence, and again, my proposition for you. One of the ways of thinking is about public culture. Because public life, public culture, public sphere is the place, like this circle, we come together, like here. There's a space, it's a physical space, and we come together and we discuss our differences, we exchange. It is public life. So it's not vertical, it is not from state governance, but it is the rules and regulations that we interiorize. It is our way of relating to each other. It's transversal. So public life is much more transversal. It's about citizens, and it brings forth differences. It is, as one philosopher said, public life is about stranger sociability. I like it, stranger sociability. We are strangers to each other, and we are socializing through ideas. And we are just trying to be the facilitator. Those who speak are the facilitators for you also to mediate socialization. So stranger sociability is very important in public life. How to live together requires avoiding violence. In Arabic language, medeni means the Medina, comes from the Medina, urban life, civic life, civilized world. So civilized is not only the cluster of civilizations we're speaking at the micro level, everyday life, more civilized everyday life. Modes of address, bonjour, salam alaikum, merhaba, whatever, is a way of bringing peace among each other. Modes of address makes part of this civic culture in public life. So I want you to think about how we think of intercultural life through the public sphere, public life. Can we think about the public culture, which is not anonymous with one national cultural values, but heterogeneous? Because we always think of public sphere, since Habermas's book, very important book, of course, on the public sphere, as the home of democracy, as one language community. Okay, one language community, because it is related with nation. But today there are many language communities in the same public life. Secondly, some of the books I quote so that you can also consult if you don't know some of them. Zygmunt Bauman, those who are from SOAS must know, they know. He has written years ago, 1987, from Polity Press, a very important book that guided me until now, Legislators and Interpreters. And I think it is still very important for us to think about intercultural life. And I want to go back and read it. While I was preparing this, I thought I have to go back and Bauman and read this classical book. Everything is not consumable this today. It's always still there are books that resist time. So he is asking the role of intellectuals. Are we legislators, like state giving rules, describing values, or interpreters, translators? So if we think we are an intercultural attitude, intercultural exchange between cultures, we are interpreters. So I think that way of looking at things in a multicultural world, of the role of intellectuals, leaders, can be important. But public life today, we observe, became a site of cultural wars, intolerance, non-civic attitude, and terrorist attacks. And so the way we live together, I mean, the way we ask how we can live together, maybe it's even today, it's worse than before because of the circulation of images and the intolerance that are rising more and more. The domain of art, pictorial, visual representations of the other, reveal these controversies, problems, and confrontations. I think that is something, maybe this has always been the case, but again today, when we speak about public life and public culture, art plays a very important role. And art is not always maybe in the positive way, so we should understand, because art reveals these fear, resentment, it deals with the other, it brings caricatural images, stereotype images of the other, try to grasp the other, and so it might also increase and deepen the polarization. So the domain of culture is becoming very important to rethink about, especially visual arts, living together. Now, of course, I have in my mind European, now I'm speaking from the European perspective, and its confrontational encounter with Islam, and I have in my mind the controversies and the violences. First affair was Salman Rushdie affair. Salman Rushdie affair in 1989, the fatwa issued by Khomeini, so violence or these fatwas are not always from Sunni background, but also Shia background, was against the author of Satanic Verses, Salman Rushdie, 1989. We were not aware that it was the domain of art, visual, again, the representation of the Prophet and the Quran, the sacred images for Muslims that were attacked. It was literature. So we thought it was purely political, but it was about public representation of Islam. And then the second, there are signposts today in Europe. Signposts is the title of, who knows, it's the title of an author, Islamic author. Radical Islam author, Sayyid Qutb. I thought some of you know. Okay, you know maybe in a different language. So when we take these signposts in Europe, there was of course the cartoon controversy in Denmark, which really created another threshold in European culture. Publication of caricatures of the Prophet in a Danish newspaper. I don't go into details, but it's the details are very important. Who published it? How they? What are the images? How you perceive it? Because we have more rumors about the images than what we feel. I took these images myself and looked at them and tried to find out what hurted me if there was something that made me laugh, it was humoristic or not. And I mean, I questioned myself also, my own perception about it. So this cartoon controversy in Denmark, why I'm giving that example, because in 2005 this happened. 2015, this year, January, we had the killings against Charlie Hebdo newspaper in Paris. The Charlie Hebdo attacks. So it was the continuation after 10 years, 2005, 2015, continues, as you say. And Charlie Hebdo is a satirical weekly, very well known, in a satirical weekly newspaper. This being outrageous and being provocative makes part of the public culture in many of the European countries. So it makes part of being irreverential to all kinds of signs of respect and power, and religion especially. So they have republished in 2005 the cartoons. This is again an indicator of the 21st century. Images can circulate very easily. Books and ideas, it is hard. Why? Because it needs translation. It needs time. You need to read it. Whereas images goes directly to your sensorial perception. You can be hurt. You don't have the mediation to think about, to rationalize, to understand. You think the other wants to hurt your feelings. So cartoons can be republished everywhere, very instantly. So in 2000, the journal that has republished the Danish cartoons, the cartoonists, very well-known figures, were assassinated in their working place, and there were more than 11 persons killed. And then the terrorists had taken hostage of people who were in a kosher supermarket. So it's not only Charlie Hebdo affair, but it was also a kosher supermarket affair. And they have taken hostage of people who were Jewish citizens, of course, who is going to act. There might have been Muslim citizens as well, if this has been 10 years ago, because Muslims were also buying kosher food very often because of halal, the proximity with halal. So now, 1 month later in Copenhagen, the same kind of attacks happened during a debate like this one debate on art, blasphemy, and freedom of expression was the title of the debate in Copenhagen. And then the synagogue, you see? So therefore, two values of that they cherish, European publics cherish. One is freedom of expression, and the second one, the rise of anti-Semitism, how to avoid anti-Semitism. And this time, it was in the name of Islam, in the name, I'm saying, in the name of avenging the prophet, that these atrocities was realized. Now, if we see the nature of these terrorist attacks, even the word terrorism is problematic. Let's say shootings or assassinations. They have targeted, they have a public character. It's not like 9/11 anonymous. They targeted very important public figures, well-known cartoonists. And secondly, they have targeted a population. In their everyday life, that is kosher supermarket or praying in a synagogue. So in that sense, I say public life is at the heart of our reflection, is what is endangered is the public life. So these attacks, in other ways, also confiscated the voices of Muslim ordinary citizens living in Europe. Because in a way, they tried to say, we are defending your religion, we are defending your community. In the Salman Rushdie affair, British Muslims said they didn't know how to react because they thought also that they were attacked. And now, in the case of Charlie Hebdo and other attacks, Muslims reacted. One reaction, I give examples because these are very important, it was in Norway. More than 1,000 Muslim citizens in Norway formed a human chain, hand in hand, around the synagogue to protect the synagogue. So this is a very performative visual art. It's not verbal. It is performative citizenship to say we express our solidarity with other co-citizens. We are co-citizens with Jews. Now that's very important because especially coming to Israeli-Palestinian affair, Europeans living, both Jews and Muslims, they export the question. they do not see themselves making part of the same country, same land, like Europe. And with these attacks, the reaction of Muslims were to say, we are co-citizens and we express our solidarity in Norway. Other one was Not in My Name movement, started in Great Britain and continued in France. Again, you can discuss it, it can be controversial, but again, it was a very important kind of agency, public agency, it's not civil society, because there were persons giving their faces and say, not in my name, meaning I do not recognize myself in that act, terrorist act, or in that definition of Islam. My Islam, my faith is different. Now, as you see, I went into these very difficult examples, but it is the changing everyday life of Muslims living in Europe. These are performative acts of citizenship in public. Now, how, and the consciousness, the fact that we share the same public life, Jews and Muslims in Europe, mosques and synagogues, halal and kosher markets. Now, what about the terms of the debate? I go because how we grasp that. Again, we have seen in the public debates very often binary opposition. Muslims hold on, they are reacting to blasphemy, and Europeans are for freedom of expression. That is really cultural wars. That is very binary opposition, which is not true. Most of the Muslims didn't speak about blasphemy. But they said maybe this is moral injury, because Muslims have a very living relationship with their prophets. It is sacred, but it is a very intimate relationship. It is not something external. So maybe we can speak about moral injury, or insult to religion, or public humiliation of Muslims because of their migrant, precarious situation as a citizen. So this is, again, a kind of issue. So we start to develop different arguments, open up the debate. Je suis Charlie, I am Charlie, or why I am not Charlie. Okay, so everyone is not obliged to be part of Charlie, even one can condemn the attacks, but one can also say, I am not Charlie. So this is how we can really turn the power of images that can hurt others and deepen the polarization by stereotypes and just making sensorial reactions against that, scandals, those that test the tolerance of other, how we avoid it, how we engage with each other in spite of these images that Muslims speak to me in all over Europe, that they are each time bombarded by these images and they have to show their level of tolerance. So how we go beyond reaction, violent reaction to those. I think one of the things that has been said by Lucy Museve is empathy, opening your hearts and empathy, how to find the humanity of the others. And I usually spoke about empathy, and you spoke about how to open our sight to the humanity of the others, and engage a kind of empathy, different gaze with each other's experience, which is not, of course, very easy. This shows that Islam is becoming part of European culture, European public culture. Becoming part of it doesn't mean it is conflict-free, it is easy. On the contrary, I think that's why there's a lot of confrontation and friction and fear. And visual domain reveals that fear. There's a book which is called How Judaism, the title I'm reading, How Judaism Became a Religion. It doesn't mean that it didn't in modern times. It was always been a religion, you're going to tell me. This is Leora Batnitsky from Princeton University, 2013. It's a very interesting book because the author tries to show how they tried, the thinkers of Jewish thinkers tried to fit into the conception of religion, Protestant conception of religion, as an individual and private matter of belief. Accommodation means also this notion of religion. I'm not saying we have to accommodate, but this is what is happening. On the one hand, we're accommodating. On the other hand, we are keeping our differences. How Judaism became a religion meant how Jewishness, how Judaism became part of European culture by means of also these controversies and accommodations. both Judaism and Islam are public religions. They are different from Christianity in that sense, and they reveal similar questions to modern secularity in that respect. So we have to keep that in mind, how Sharia and Halakha, as religion of law, is in the everyday life practices of Jews and Muslims. It is maybe also for that reason, for those who come from Germany must know about this controversy on circumcision of a Turkish origin young boy in Germany, which became a big controversy. And they said this is the injury of the boy's physical injury for boy's body. And then the Jewish also community reacted to that because the Germans they tried to forbid the circumcision as a religious ritual, and of course that triggered these controversies around also Jewish circumcision, and there was a big debate around that. So sometimes these issues are very similar. We should learn from each other's experience. Now, the visuality, so Muslims are becoming part of European life. There is visual element there, because they become, the difference, Hannah Arendt has written that making yourself visible in the public life, making your difference visible, not hiding it, is an act of citizenship. It's a courageous act of citizenship. It is not first you have your rights of citizenship and you come to the public sphere, but already showing yourself, manifesting your difference by your veil, by your fasting during Ramadan, your dietary practices, praying. It's a way of showing yourself, manifesting your difference in the public life, and makes part of citizenship. So that triggers a resentment. Visuality, the visual practices of Muslims in Europe. And then in turn, the visual representations of Islam also in the artistic or newspapers create other resentments. So intercultural leadership requires translation between these cultural codes and controversies. So I would say the power of images, because when you damage an image, when you damage the persons who create these images, you want to render these images powerless. But the fact is, it becomes even more powerful. It is the power of interpretation, I think, which will be the intercultural leadership. Because when you leave the images only to circulate without mediation, without going back to text, without reflexivity, without translation, then it can hurt and deepen the misunderstanding. So what we need to do is to really turn the power of images into power of interpretation. That is the circle of philosophers, maybe like that. You can work and see how we can give other layers of interpretations to these images. If I might have time for, again, 10 minutes, I would give you some images. I'm sorry, I don't want to make your feelings hurt. This can be, it's not me trying to be provocative, it is some artists, but how and why some Muslims were provoked or not. One of them, those examples that not all of them you know, I'm sure, maybe some Germans or also, do you know this one? Yeah. Okay, Olaf Metzel is a well-known German artist, and he has already done it in a German museum, but this didn't trigger any controversy. But once you have it in a city, again, public square, in front of the Kunsthalle Museum, there is this naked, this is a sculpture, and then with a headscarf. And you can see that, of course, this creates a kind of, I'm not using the word blasphemy, but purity and purity. You juxtapose some kind of sign of purity, which this is the veil, who tries to protect purity of women, and then the nakedness, which reminds impurity to Muslims, and this woman is exposed to all kinds of gazes, public gazes. Of course, this has a very aggressive statement. So, and they have called it Turkish delight, very targeting the Muslim Turkish population in Vienna, and also it is, of course, kind of playing with the dignity of women and men. And then some men, we suppose that they were Turks, during a night, they damaged or they laid down the sculpture. Although when you go to the